yeah, the Wharton thing was really big. It was a really big moment to feel like my work had been recognised by one of the best business schools in the world. But also with all of those moments, it's a moment. It's a moment. So I think success for me is more about the maintained level of happiness throughout the year versus the moments that I used to chase, which needed to be big firework moments. It's actually the little sparks. It's traveling and meeting someone on the plane on the way to that amazing talk that I had a really great conversation with is probably coming to the surface as more joy to me than necessarily those big moments that everyone else is watching externally, if that makes sense.
Welcome to The Slowdown, your time to redefine success and growth on your own terms with a little inspiration from others. Stefanie Sword-Williams has built a brand using a swear word, so I'm going to enjoy using it several times in this episode. Fuck Being Humble is a global mission, movement and training consultancy inspiring individuals to be unapologetically proud of their achievements and overcome the fear of self-promotion. Stef has spoken at the offices of Apple, Netflix, Unilever, Nike, Google, L'Oreal and Microsoft, at universities from the Wharton Business School in New York to London College of Fashion, trained over 700 people in her side hustle school program and has been Forbes 30 Under 30. She also did a TEDx on why the world needs to be less humble. She's a fellow at the Royal Society of the Arts and continues to reinvest her profits and time into community projects that help improve the lives of others. I've seen Stef speak a few times and have always loved the messages she shares, so I'm delighted to have her here in Brazen Studios for this episode, which is sponsored in partnership with Clue, the period and cycle tracker. I share an unmissable discount to Clue during the ad break of this episode, so do not miss out. It's also in the show notes. We talk about how confidence is a muscle that you can build, knowing when to raise your price and when to say no, and why reset is a radical act in our hustle-obsessed world. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, Stef. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me on your show.
You are an award-winning founder, speaker, and author of the book Fuck Being Humble, Why Self-Promotion Isn't a Dirty Word. I have to ask the obvious question. Why did you decide on that title? Did anyone tell you this would be a bad idea? Like, what was your journey to that title?
Answer very quickly, yes. Lots of people told me it was a bad idea. Not even a bad idea, just that it might alienate people or people might not be ready for that message. When I was working in advertising, so I spent the first 7 years of my career working in advertising, and we were storytellers. That was our job for our clients. And when it came to our TV ads being released or our print campaigns being out on bus stops, we wouldn't share our work unless it had been featured in major industry press. And I remember looking around being like, but isn't this strange? Like, aren't we storytellers? Like, aren't we all about amplifying messages and advocating for what we share and what we do? And I found it really strange that in an advertising industry, it's very common to only speak about yourself confidently or highly if somebody else has kind of validated you. So that was the first insight for me. The second one was that a lot of my friends struggled with that idea of promoting themselves. They hated interviews, they hated writing their CVs, they hated anything to do with negotiating. And I'd move jobs quite regularly, and I knew what it took, what you have to do in those rooms, why you have to play ball, why you have to always negotiate, all the things that if you stay in a job for the first 10 years of your career in one place, then you don't build up that experience that you need to actually know how to navigate those situations. And I think that was happening. So I had my advertising experience. I was kind of like a careers agony aunt amongst my friends. And then the final thing was just that when we think about success, we were often told, humble yourself, be humble. Don't get too big for your boots. Oh, someone needs to take them down a peg or two. And I just think they're really negative things that we say. Like, why do we say that? All of the conditioning that we're believed to do or show up in certain ways. Tamu Thomas is a brilliant author. I know you've had her on the podcast. She talked about the fact that as women in particular, we're conditioned to be nice. And being nice means abandoning our needs or showing up in a way that's palatable. And so particularly as a woman, as it was an observation, I was seeing more women struggled with advocating for themselves, and they are more likely to be modest in situations. I just really wanted to use and say a message that woke people up to the fact that this may not be the only way. And when you look at the careers industry, it just hadn't been shaken up for years. It was very corporate, very dry. Most companies are like, shoot for the stars, you know, just really generic language. And I felt like I could challenge that. I could challenge the status quo, and I could tackle a problem that I'm seeing firsthand happening in my industry, in my peer groups, and as a society, particularly in the UK. So when I came up with the name, yeah, there was definitely met with reservations. I maybe made the mistake of asking friends that weren't that brave, you know, that weren't in the brand and marketing space. My parents were accountants. Then they don't get that vibe. They would never understand why I'd put a swear word in my brand name. So there was a lot of hesitation from people around me. But I think something I'd always cared about was disruptive marketing and advertising. Like, how do we grab people's attention? How do we get people to sit up? And particularly behavior change. And in order to create behavior change, you have to create a mission or a movement for people to get behind. So that was the journey of Fuck Being Humble.
And is there other examples of disruptive campaigns that you've loved, like in the advertising world?
So many. Surreal, the cereal brand, is one of my favourite brands at the moment that have consistently killed it since they've come out of the gate. They are constantly challenging brand and marketing. How you say that we're launching in Sainsbury's, they like come up with incredible Instagram posts, or even when the founders made Forbes Under 30, they did a LinkedIn post where they were like, we would like to thank ourselves because we're absolutely brilliant, we're amazing, couldn't have done this if it wasn't for me being an absolute legend. Like I love anything that cuts through the noise, which I know everybody is competing to do, but very few people actually do it. So I think they're a brilliant example of it. But most interestingly for me, what I always really was fascinated by was the behaviour change side of things. So Volkswagen did a play concept years ago where they wanted to get more people moving. So they turned a staircase in a subway into a musical piano. And everybody was running up and down, and they increased participation of increased steps by like 80% or something whilst the campaign was running. And then they turned recycling bins into an arcade game. So everybody started recycling. And it was all these like, disruption doesn't have to be provocative. It could be just a really clever concept that makes people do something.
Yeah, and there's so much on that I want to dive into. But first, I always love to hear more about the genesis of people and the kind of origin stories. You mentioned your parents were accountants. Where were you raised? By whom? And how do you think that inferred kind of who you are now?
So I was born in Spain, in Madrid. My family lived there for 5 years and I lived there for 2 years. Then shortly after that, we moved to Leeds, slightly less exotic, back to the UK. My mum's from Birmingham and my dad's from Manchester. And then we moved to the US. So we lived in New Jersey, just outside of New York, for 2.5 years. And then we came back to Leeds, where we kind of sadly set up camp. I would have quite liked to continue to live in these interesting countries. And my dad then moved to Asia when I was 18 and lived there for 11 years. So I spent a lot of time going in and out of Asia and just traveling a lot. It was always very ingrained in our family. So for me, that was a big part. So seeing the world, experiencing the world. My dad traveled a lot on business. So he actually worked in insurance and my mum worked in accounting, but my stepdad also works in accounting. And he very much climbed the ladder, succeed, play the game, schmoozer. You know, he's extremely successful. He has role modelled hard work, determination, as has my mum. They're very similar people in that way. My mum actually went back to university when I was like 8 and studied, got her degree, and then did extremely well in her career as an accountant. So determination, grit, self-belief was very important. My dad was incredible at taking my CV and making my Saturday job sound like I was this budding entrepreneur when really I'd not done that much. He was very good at seeing my value and not letting me hide it. I think that was something really important. And the other thing I would say is both parents moved jobs a lot. So it was very often, you know, if I'm not getting my worth, if I'm not being treated well, I'm on to the next place. Whereas my stepdad actually worked at the same company from 16 to his retirement. So he was the only person really that I had in my life that stayed in one company from like a work perspective. But my mum and dad were very much ambitious in the sense that they would not really settle for environments that weren't right.
I think that's such an interesting one. Yeah, looking back, like my parents very much like understood that work was the thing that you get into a business and you stay for a very, very long time. And that if that's kind of the model of success for you, then entrepreneurship is hard. Knowing when to leave is hard. So it's interesting that was like modeled for you quite young.
I think one thing that all parents did around that generation was you've got to stick out the job. So I had a really toxic first job, and for a while the narrative was, we'll stay in the job at least until a year, stick it out at least until a year, which I just don't think they would have said to me now. We're in a completely different time. And eventually I made it to 11 months and I had to quit because it was too intense. But I think that notion of stick it out, but if a better opportunity comes along, go for it. That was very much what success looked like.
And then what was your first like serious job, maybe beyond that one that was 11 months? And is that what took you to London?
That was my first serious job, working as a brand and marketing exec at a small agency. Unfortunately, the owner of the company had extremely toxic behaviours and the turnover of staff was wild. Like, people just couldn't tolerate it. It was an unsafe environment, I would say. And what ended up happening was I interviewed for 3 jobs. 2 were in Nottingham, where I was living, because that's where I did my university degree, and another one was in Manchester. And I remember my dad saying to me, you're made for bigger things, like move cities, like go for the one in Manchester. And I did, and that ended up being at TBWA, one of the best ad agencies at the time in Manchester. And that was a really great exposure to what it was really like to work in a company with HR and systems and policies and not mistreated in that way. So it was a really good exposure of what the real ad industry was like.
And how long were you there?
I was there for 2.5 years. And then I moved to an independent agency called Love and loved them. They were great. We did some great work. But I found I wasn't very patient and I needed to be stimulated in lots of different ways. I didn't really love the project work I was working on. It was a lot of alcohol brands and it was like packaging briefs, and it just wasn't giving me that get up out of bed energy. And eventually I moved to London and joined a startup with 2 other people to grow this small production company, which was all about making meaningful work. I moved to another company, TCO London, and did each place. It was 18 months was my cut-off. Every 18 months I'd move. And then my final job was at Revolt, which is a creative agency, but more on the strategy side. And that was the final job before fully quitting and going for Fuck Being Humble. So I moved regularly, and I talk about it very publicly to, first of all, say each time I got a pay rise and promotion, which is not always possible when you are working in companies. You know, sometimes there are those hierarchical scenarios. Sometimes you have to wait out situations, and that means, you know, you don't always get the movement that you want. But I also think each move was about getting closer to the work that I wanted to work on, which was meaningful work or having more autonomy and being more creatively involved.
And obviously the culmination of those 2 things is doing something for yourself. How did you take that jump? Because I think there is a lot of fear around going, you know, self-employed, writing a book, doing something off your own back, losing the stability of a regular income. Like, how long were you thinking about doing that? What was that kind of journey to actually taking the jump?
So it's really interesting. It was actually mine and my partner's anniversary recently. And I remember on our first date telling him, I'm going to launch this thing called Fuck Being Humble, but it hadn't started yet. And I didn't launch it for 11 months after that. So I think it's important for me to say that for anyone listening, is that like I actually sat on the idea for 11 months. I knew I had it in me, but I just went to loads of events. Really the core for me with Fuck Being Humble, it was just meant to be a networking community. That was it. I wanted to create cool events. I wanted to build my own community, and I wanted to be a speaker and also spotlight other cool people. And for me, it was an Instagram account. It was as simple as an Instagram account, a LinkedIn article that I wrote where I said why I'm launching a platform called Fuck Being Humble. And it just went semi-viral at the time because LinkedIn was even more boring than it can be now. It was quite LinkedIn monologues, not really anybody was being that disruptive in that space. And I remember just getting a really quick positive reaction. Like, lots of people were engaging with it. I was featured in the Times. I had a double page spread written about me. I went on BBC World News. I was on BBC Radio London. Like, all of this quick press before I'd even ran an event. It was like,
that's crazy. You hadn't actually done anything.
I hadn't done anything. So I just launched an Instagram account and a website called Fuck Being Humble and written this article on LinkedIn. this journalist then wrote a piece on me. The Times piece was quite significant. It was a springboard. I think it really platformed me out into other channels. And it was off the back of that, then publishers were approaching me again before I'd written anything, before I'd launched an event. They were like, love the title, you should write a book. And I was like, okay, cool. Like literally prank call, thanks, but see you later. Like not my vibe. And I was like, look, I don't even know. I don't know if anyone is going to believe in what I'm saying. I've never run an event. I don't give me time if I'm even remotely interested in this. And then I launched the Instagram account in June, and the first event was in September, and it went really well. And then the second one was in October, and there was double the capacity. And then the third event was in December or January, and 180 people had come, and it was all word of mouth. And I remember looking out at this sea of people and being like, this idea is bigger than me and what I can do in London by myself. And a book would be really cool because it would reach people nationally or even globally. So that was the tipping point. But it wasn't in the plan. It was never in the plan.
And I love, you've spoken about this before, this how did you know that you could be a speaker, and how did you put kind of speaker on your bio? How does one become a speaker?
Well, that was the thing for me, was because I'd had such a varied experience to this point. I was like, I'd love to speak at events. I'd go to these networking events all the time. I'd find them quite boring. They were quite male, pale, stale, which I often joke about. And I just didn't engage with that many people. It felt like it was private school educated. It was founders with 50 years experience. It was people who had come from lots of family wealth. It didn't really matter what they did because they'd just pick a different thing tomorrow. And I just didn't resonate. I was this young, ambitious, northern girl in London bouncing around, and I just wanted to see more people that were doing things that were closer to my age. So I was 26 at this point. I was like, what about the person that's running 3 side hustles and they're totally killing it? Or what about this person that's doing a photography exhibition? I was meeting so many cool people, but myself and them weren't getting invited to speak at this event. And it's because we have this hierarchical thing, which is once you've proven yourself or once somebody's picked you, you deserve a spotlight. And I don't agree with that. I think we should be learning, if nothing else, from younger generations and really celebrating and uplifting people. So I just decided to book an event space and book myself as the lead act, and that was where it went. After that event, I was a public speaker. It was that first event, I was like, this is the start of me being an event speaker or host or whatever it may be. But I wanted to do more of it at work, but I was getting too kind of dragged down with my actual job. And I recognised that ahead of me was the managing director, the head of creative. There were so many other people that would get selected before I could probably be a speaker. And even then it would still be red taped as to what the business wanted me to say versus what I really wanted to express from myself.
That's so true. It's really true. And it sounds like it then sort of snowballed for you. And what I'm always curious about on this podcast is, at the peak of that success, let's say, to me, reading your bio, maybe speaking at the Wharton Business School in New York, kind of to me is wow, bucket list. How are you actually feeling? How was all of this success and all of this work and flying around and all of this stuff, where was that kind of getting to for you on a personal level?
I actually really love this question because I think you don't realise you're in your success peak until you look back. I think that's a really common thing for founders. What people would look at writing the book, at first it was really fun, but it got delayed because of the pandemic. So I had to wait an extra 4 months before it came out, and I was just ripping my hair out, and I was so worried about people judging me, and should I have put that in it? And it'd already gone to print, and there was all these emotions. So launching a book in the pandemic, or I couldn't have a book launch, I couldn't hit the sales targets. I'm really proud of it now, but the actual experience of it was hard. It felt like it was flying off to a good start, and then things changed. And to your earlier question, I side hustled for 2.5 years before quitting my job and going full time. But I quit in March 2020 to be a public speaker, and all public events got cancelled. So where people meet me now, and when they meet me, they're like, oh, you got so many paid clients when you started out. And I was like, can I just stop you right there? I was like, one client I worked for free, and it was a massive global business. I was like, the other client I probably got £100, and there was another client that it was great, but it was 2.5 years. I was like, she's only 6 months in, And I was 2.5 years in before I felt like I was really reaching that success. I think quitting my job and having that trajectory felt really good. It felt like that was a peak moment. But then the pandemic hit and literally ruined it all. So then I just felt like I was back at the bottom, scrambling and having to rebuild again. I would say some other peak moments. It was as we were coming out of the pandemic. I remember having probably the most financially successful month I've ever had in March, because it's International Women's Day and I did a lot of partnerships. And I remember thinking, like, it was great brands, it was great projects. And I was like, I'm on to something. And then like the next month was quiet. And I was like, oh. I would say this year has definitely felt like a peak success year, which is 7 years in, which is important to say. I think the reason it feels like a peak success year is because it's felt more effortless. So I'm very confident in myself, in what I'm delivering, in my fees. I'm charging rates I'm happy with. Work is coming in. I don't feel like I'm doubting myself as much. Yeah, the Wharton thing was really big. It was a really big moment to feel like my work had been recognised by one of the best business schools in the world. But also with all of those moments, it's a moment. It's a moment. So I think success for me is more about the maintained level of happiness throughout the year versus the moments that I used to chase, which needed to be big firework moments. It's actually the little sparks. It's traveling and meeting someone on the plane on the way to that amazing talk that I had a really great conversation with is probably coming to the surface as more joy to me than necessarily those big moments that everyone else is watching externally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I wanted to double click on what you just said around fees, deciding what your price is or increasing your price as a freelancer when information is gatekept and people don't really tell you how much they're charging and so on. How do you do that? How do you go about like setting the price and then increasing the price? And if you do work with clients repeatedly, say they come back next International Women's Day for a thing and you've increased the price, how do you explain or justify that?
So something I would say to any freelancer, self-employed person, only you can give yourself a pay rise. So you need to have a bit of audacity. You need to have a bit of like, well, if I'm not doing it, no one else is, because a client is not going to come back and go, do you know what? We've decided a year later, we're going to give you an extra grand. That's not how this show works. Yeah. This is not how the reality works. So you have to be in control of that. And what I started to realize was like each call I got on, I was like, I'm just going to add an extra 200 and see if they say yes. And not every call landed like that, but some did. And I was thinking, okay, good to know. So for me, it was almost being a bit cheeky to see, like, in my mindset, it was being a bit cheeky, but just to see each time, if I just added £50 on, would they flinch? And they don't, is the truth of it. So I think getting comfortable with that increase and then having honest conversations with people. I've been fortunate that a few clients have actually said to me, you're undercharging. Like, just to let you know, we paid a man double and he was not even giving us the same amount of quality that you are. So please at least add an extra X on your number. So I've been very fortunate to have that, which I appreciate. And then I think I always ask the client what their budgets are first. And that you can see a trend. Like, I can see what the average rate is this year. And I gauge that, and sometimes I can push it higher and sometimes it needs to come down. But for me, I know people can be very strict on, this is my fee and I'm sticking to it. But truthfully, that's not realistic. No. If you've got bills to pay, if you've got commitments, if you've got a family to provide for, I'd rather do 10, 100 projects if that gets me the grand I need each month to make sure I can pay my life, right? So I'm always very open with, this is my rate. But if the opportunity speaks to me, if it feels like it could expand me, if it feels like it's an opportunity grower, then I'm open to that. I think with regards to increasing your fees, it is just as simple as, since we last worked together, my fees have increased to the following rate. Done. Sometimes I think we have to over-explain things, or we think we do and we don't. And businesses are, if you're working with a business, you just need to treat it as business to business. You're a supplier to them. Mm-hmm. Take away the personal. And something that really helps is writing it in the third person, really stripping out any I's. If you ever speak to me with regards to fuck being humble in a business sense, I will always say, we charge this. I'd never say I charge this or my rates are. I say our fees are, because it really detaches it from it being like I'm asking for this versus this is what we have set, we being me. You know, it does help.
Abadesi Osunsade, who was on this podcast, has a fantastic kind of workshop on being a freelancer and setting your prices. And she says exactly that, which is like, we're too quick to like over explain and add too many words. She was like, shut up.
Create an awkward silence.
Like create awkward silence. Yeah. She's like, even if it's in person or on the phone, she's a great kind of role play of being like, you know, my fee is £1,000. Then the client might go, well, you know, that's kind of really the top end of our budget. Don't say anything. Don't be like, as women, we're like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, I guess I could maybe do it. What's your, 800, 700? Like, what? You're already, they haven't even said no.
Yeah.
She's like, say nothing. Then they go, okay, well, I guess maybe we could like just let them see their own thought through while you say nothing, which I think is like so interesting because we're just not conditioned to doing that. We're conditioned to like people pleasing and being like, okay, maybe I am asking for too much and I'm not worth this price. And I loved what you said earlier because you described it recently at a talk we were at around, there's this sense of like we have to always be on this like trajectory of like everything getting better, this like curve exponentially to the right, which is capitalism, that says, oh, well, if March 2024 was a hit, 2025 should be X and 2026 should look like this. And you have a great thing, please say it, on like looking back at that time.
So for me, the way I think about that aspect and the way I manage my own expectations is one of the things I say to myself is, if I only do this once, I'm so proud of myself. And I had to start saying that to myself because the year after that most successful month, I didn't have that. In fact, it was like half the amount that I'd made. And I was so distressed about it. But actually, I was living in Paris at the time and I was having the time of my life. And it was that reminder of like, if this only happens once, I'm so proud. And then it just keeps you grounded. Anything else is a bonus is my business strategy. I know what I need to earn each month to pay my bills and live a relatively happy life. Anything else is a bonus. It just relieves that pressure of repeating yourself. Because actually as humans, we don't repeat ourselves. Like certain years, you have to rest more. Certain years, you have to sow the seeds. Certain years, you have to just let it bloom. Like you can't expect the same amount of growth. And if you're not working in a corporate space and you are running your own business and your own finances, that is the luxury of running your own business. Like when I worked in companies and I had sales targets, it was awful. I hated it. And I vowed to myself when I run my own business, I will not be a prisoner to, I need to have 20K months or whatever that figure is, because it's not that important to me. It just isn't.
This season of The Slowdown is brought to you by Clue, the period and cycle tracking app that goes deeper than dates on a calendar. I talk a lot on this podcast about somatic wisdom and tuning into the signals from your body, and that really starts with understanding your cycle better. Clue is an essential part of my daily routine, not just knowing when my period is coming, but knowing what phase of my cycle I'm in, how I'm feeling, my energy, my sleep, and now I use it in the trying to conceive mode. If you've ever felt like your body was trying to tell you something but you weren't quite sure what, this is where Clue comes in. It's science-backed, inclusive, and totally ad-free, so that you can reclaim your rhythm one insight at a time. And especially for the Slowdown listeners, Clue is offering a 75% discount code on their annual Clue Plus subscription via their website. To redeem this, go to helloclue.com and enter the code SLOWDOWN at checkout. That's SLOWDOWN, one word. I'll also attach the direct link with the discount already embedded in the show notes. So download Clue today and start making space for the signals your body's been sending all along. There are some real blessings to being a freelancer, running your own project, managing your own time, managing your own finances, ideally giving yourself regular pay rises. But I guess the shadow side is overworking, like not knowing where the limits are or testing those limits or running yourself into the ground because you are trying to do so much. And there's this scarcity mindset of, well, I don't know when the next project's going to come through and my work is project based and I'm paid by the hour of my time. So let me use as much of my time as possible. So I was wondering if you've ever had burnout. What was that experience like? And how you got there and what you think helped afterwards.
I have been running non-stop at such a high pace. I didn't know what a normal pace was. And I actually experienced quite a traumatic event in my personal life. And the impact of that led to nervous system shutdown, PTSD, I would say high functioning depression and anxiety. And that literally was the moment that things had to give, something had to change, because I physically could not hold the same amount that I could. And that is really hard for a high achiever, overgiver, which I would say is very much in my identity, as I'm an overgiver in relationships, in advice, in presentations, in pitch works. And it totally, through lots of therapy and realization, it totally comes down to that like need for validation, not wanting to be rejected, all of those things. But when I experienced the last year and a half, really, something physically had to change. I had a period where I basically couldn't speak about something, and I eventually just like cried every day. I experienced something called emotional flooding, and it was just awful. I could not do my job in the way that I was doing it, and I knew I had to start taking rest seriously and recognize that I've done enough. That's been a big thing for me over the last year. I actually said to my friends, we went to Mexico for Christmas, and we all went round and said, what's our word for the year? And my word was less. It was, I have to physically start doing less to prioritize my well-being, mental, physical well-being. And that was the big shift really for me, was really looking at jobs and going, okay, if I accept this one, what am I getting rid of? I used to be able to do 3 events in a day, which was a lot. And now I can push it to 1 is what I preference. I wouldn't try and do more than 1 anymore. And that's hard for you to take, as it's a hard process to see that you have physically lost something, or you were drowning yourself so much it was never really sustainable. So that was a big learning curve over the last year, has been pulling back, saying no to more. If something is saying yes to, I have to remove something else, and creating time for rest and seeing rest as part of my process. So I've started working with a business coach, and she really helpfully reminded me that the reason I need to charge X is because someone needs to pay for my recovery time, which is a really powerful phrase that I've never really heard anyone say to me. Sometimes I'm like, oh, but am I charging too much? And she's like, no, because in order for you to put on the show that you do, somebody needs to cover your rest time, because you're not going to be doing this. You're not doing 10 speaking slots a day because you physically can't do that. And that was such a big mental shift for me, because I could sit and have a restful morning because I knew I was coming to do this podcast today, because I want to be here and I want to be really present, but I could rest without the guilt. And that was the big thing, the big changer for me.
Yeah, and there's something you said there that I think about a lot, which is this like line between purpose, legacy, like wanting to do all of this big stuff, ambition, versus contentment, and just feeling like I've done enough. And I think when I was younger, I had, and was it societal, was it me, was it cultural, this feeling of like big dream, big vision, like be doing this huge thing, like what's the epitaph, on the tombstone that says like this thing that you've left behind, versus kind of as I've gotten older, feeling like actually the goal is just being content every day with how much I've done.
Which is totally how I feel. Like I said to my therapist, I was like, if something were to happen to me tomorrow, I feel really content. I feel really happy with the life I live and have lived. I don't really have a lot of what if I had gone this way, or what if I'd have gone that way. And I think there's something that I've learned a lot as I've gone through therapy, is often we have to choose between authenticity and attachment. So in relationships in particular, to hold on to certain relationships, we dilute our authenticity. And over the last year, as a trauma response, I've definitely stepped into being more authentic, which is saying no, not people pleasing, being very clear, listening to my gut, trusting my decisions has been a really big one for me. And just creating that space for me to actually be present, not just in the professional space, but in the personal space. Like at home, my partner has always done a lot of the home work. He does the cooking and cleaning, and we often joke that he's better at it than me. But part of the change that I've seen with my relationship with work is that I'm more present at home. I do more around the house, and that has helped our relationship.
That's the opportunity cost piece.
Yeah.
There.
It was
right?
a big realization, and going to the gym, like things like that. Like I could never create space for it. I was always too busy. I always wanted to throw myself into work. And now I try and plan my day around going to the gym, which is just not me as an identity. I've had to really work on that. And even me saying that's not me as an identity is a limiting belief. Like I have chose that because it required a change in behavior, a significant change in behavior. So I feel like that's where I've really noticed the difference from busy to burnout is like, I'm not impressed by people's busyness anymore. Like, you know, it used to be like, oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I'm like,
And it would
cool.
probably trigger something in you like, oh, I should be
Totally.
busy too.
Totally. And it's like, I think people often do that with me because my whole brand's about self-promotion and they want to give me these updates. And I actively try now to be like, and how's everything outside of work? I really try and steer the conversation away from work where I can, because I feel, to the legacy point, like I don't want that to be my legacy. I don't want this. I want you to believe in yourself and I want you to back yourself and I want you to advocate for yourself. But I don't want you to do it at the detriment of your health, because I've been there and it's a long way back and it's not a feeling I want to role model.
Well, then a nice segue is the career come down, which is a term that you've coined to describe that moment in your career when on paper everything looks great. You've done all the right things, climbed the ladder, earned more money, ticked all the boxes, but underneath the surface you're quietly wondering, is this really it? And I remember seeing that post that you did on Instagram, and it really resonating with me. And so I'm wondering, when did that realization come to you? Was it a personal thing, or were you seeing it among your friends? As you say, you're the agony aunt for your friends, so you're like, wow, there's a phenomena happening. Is it an age thing? Is there a particular like time in our career where we just feel this way?
Yeah, so I think it's a bit like in relationships, you get like the 7 to 10 year ick. Like, I think that's what happens in our careers. There is actually research that shows people start to really doubt their careers 10 years in, because to the point, you've done all the things you're meant to do, but something's still not right. I was speaking to a lot of friends who were like, you know, I've kind of reached the point I can get to. I'm going to earn this amount of money. I'm a bit like meh about it, but I've never trained in anything else. So I wouldn't even know where I'd go with it. I don't have the belief to start a business. Like, all of these discussions were happening around me. I realized in the advertising industry, writing the book, I'd actually had a career come down with that industry, because I kept wanting to do this meaningful work and I kept wanting to get there. And eventually I just had to admit it and tap out and be like, this industry isn't what I thought it was. Like, if I want to create that purpose for me, I have to step away and create it under my own rules, under my own guise. And actually, I had that at that point. And I think what I'm realizing as well is that we just develop so much as humans. What we were chasing last year can be different to this year, even from like month to month. Sometimes, you know, you want just a calm nervous system. Sometimes you want, money in the bank because you're saving for a wedding. Like, there's different things that we need to be able to move away from the goals that we set when we were like 16 or 18 or 20. And I think so many people reach a level of dissatisfaction in their jobs and just go, well, this is it then. But there's 3 solutions in the book. So the first option is, how do you stay in your career but make it work for you? And that for me is really about having honest conversations, asking for what you actually need, you know, setting boundaries, really being clear on what it is that's missing and that you want to add more into your situation. The second route is how to reinvent yourself and just go do the thing you always wanted to do, or maybe something that's more aligned. And the final chapter that's really changed my life has been how to tap out of work being your identity, and how we actually create this pressure on ourselves. So I talk about a collection of sayings and things that when people say, oh, you know, my work is my life's work, even that saying commits us that, right, well, I have to be doing this for my entire life. And in the book, I actually talk about my stepdad, who was an accountant, but his life's work wasn't a spreadsheet. It was to entertain people. You know, he's the first on the karaoke. He's does the park run every week for the community. Like, we can look beyond our careers to be meeting our purpose needs. And I don't think we talk enough about that. And even the language we use, we can say it's a disaster, or we could say it's an emergency, when it's really not.
We're not doing open heart surgery.
No, we're not. And we get really lost in the urgency of our careers, the need for it to happen in certain ways, at certain paces, in certain situations. And truthfully, it's what you said earlier, it's contentment. How can you consistently find contentment and be okay with seeing other people grow at different rates, and know that your work and your career is not definitive to who you are as a person?
We're a weird generation. We're this generation where identity and work are so closely connected, and we have social media platforms, LinkedIn, around like just putting that as your like bio.
Yeah.
And on Instagram and all of these other platforms, like you're encouraged by others to put like what you do as the number one thing about you. And so when we tie our identity so closely to work, you know, of course these things happen. How could we not become like very attached to the outcomes of this stuff? You don't want people to think that fuck being humble is just about work, but I don't think it is. And I think there is an importance, as you're saying, in the confidence, especially with women, for them to also be not humble about what they do at home, about invisible domestic labor, about the way that they're raising their kids and stuff. I feel like that has previously been such a like, oh, well, you do that by default.
Yes.
And we don't brag about that.
Yes.
But now I'm seeing like more and more on TikTok and Instagram, people bragging about their homes and how well they've cleaned them. And I think that's the like new frontier of where we should be being less humble, maybe.
The question you should be asking yourself is, what would you do if you weren't posting it online? Like, that's really, truly the best question to help keep you grounded and centered around the things you're most interested in, because it's just all trend chasing, right? So it's like, oh, okay, cool, I'm going to be a trad housewife this week, or okay, now I'm going to be a boss babe the next week. Like, it's still living out your life through the visual lens of what is trending of that time, and that's not where we find sustained happiness. So I think what I would say to people with their careers is give yourself the flexibility to change. Like, that's honestly the biggest thing. Like, maybe you started in an industry that made you happy and now it doesn't, and that's okay. Or maybe you wanted to just have an easy job, but now you want something more purposeful. Like, it's okay to change what we feel, think and believe. The best people do actually change their beliefs, and they're open to challenging themselves. And I think that's where we can find some happiness in personal and professional. But it's knowing that you and your identity can and should change over the multiple different years that you have on this planet, and allowing yourself just to follow your curiosity wherever it takes you.
Yeah. And we've talked a bit about the sort of macro ways that you've found pacing yourself and sort of slowing down to a pace that works for you. Are there micro daily habits that you've developed that could maybe be 3 pieces of advice on ways you slow down in your day-to-day?
Yes. So one of the things that really helped, listening to your podcast has really helped, changing my consumption of media. So what I'm consuming, I would always read books about getting there to the top quickest, how to earn more money, all of these things. And Cal Newport's book, Slow Productivity, completely changed the way I work, because every time I feel that, oh my God, Steph, you should be doing more, I'm like, no, fewer projects, more detail, be consistent with that. Like, really changing that, listening to your podcast and it being about slower ways to live and be happy and succeed in our own worlds, like finding the resources that are echoing the sentiment that I want to live has been really important. Something a bit personal, but I think could be beneficial to the listeners. My therapist tasked me with not giving advice to people for 3 months. So my job is obviously quite information-based, but I'd carried that identity through to lots of different relationships in my life, and that was draining me. It was actually taking up a lot, and to recognize that and go, actually, I'm not going to be here to save the day, and I'm not going to give my advice, and I'm not going to make this my problem. I'm going to just allow that person to figure it out. And I can actively say, look, my therapist has asked me to not give advice to people in my life right now, so I'm going to try and work on that, but I'm here to listen. I can't get actively involved, and I had to have conversations.
I think a lot of people prefer to just be listened to. I found that there's a level of frustration that you can feel with being the advice giver.
Yes.
And then them not taking your advice.
Yes,
because that
and that was
happens 98% of the time. And so they wouldn't take it, and then you'd be like, well, I just wasted my whole day. You sat and cried on my sofa, and I told you all the things that you should do. And it's like, they don't want advice often. They just want to be heard.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like dual reason to give less advice, which was I'm annoyed at the end of the day that you haven't taken any of my advice, and you've come all the way back round to me with the same problem.
Yeah.
And 2, you didn't even want, you're annoyed that I'm giving you advice.
Yeah.
And so I felt that was like needed for me. And now I have like 2 things. I either ask, I say, would you like me to advise you on that?
Yeah.
Or I just don't give it.
Yeah. And I think a third thing has been asking for help and be willing to receive it. So I have, one of my identity traits is hyper-independence. And, you know, that's served me well to a point, but I have bootstrapped my entire business. And this year has been the year where I have like therapy, business coach, cross-mentoring, outsourcing, like really, and that comes with obviously having built business financials to do that, which is, I want to be fully transparent. Like the reason I can do that this year is because I have reached that financial point that I can outsource in that way. But it was actually acknowledging I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to carry it all alone. Maybe there are people that could do this better than I can do, and I can let that control go in some ways. And just really being able to receive that. I think that my therapist said to me, you know, I think you're lonely. I think you self-isolate. I think you've had to because of what you've been going through. But I think you need to ask for more support. And she was right. Like I was hell-bent on being like, I'm the strong, independent woman that can run my business all alone. And it's like, for what? Like, why? Why do I need to prove this? Like, I don't want to run a team. And that's very clear to me. But I absolutely can outsource bits to specialists or ask for support in different areas and allow myself to see that support as enriching my life. And I think also just trying to find people that can have these conversations with you. I've got a friend that I could see she wasn't impressed with my busyness. Like I felt embarrassed telling her how busy I was because I could just vibe her. She was just like, cool. So how's your partner and how's your parents? It was really important to have people to hold that mirror back to me, and they didn't validate that busyness. They didn't celebrate me for being constantly like that. I think that's been really important for me. And also not filling in my weekends or spare time with stuff. I could never read that I needed social rest. I'm like, well, I don't need social rest because I've not seen my friends this week. And it's like, yes, but you spoke to 1,000 people across 4 days. Yes, you do need social rest. And, you know, having those rotting weekends where you like sit at home and I don't feel shame or guilt for just pottering around the house. So kind of changing that relationship with what I deemed to rest to need to look like or not look like, and how other people make me feel about having that downtime and feeling okay with things being easy. We're conditioned to think that hard work has to be grueling, that it has to be exhausting, that, you know, you couldn't possibly charge that much money for 1 hour because you should have worked 40 hours that week to earn that. And actually, if you find something that you're great at and you can charge it at a high rate and it comes easy to you, do that. Like my version of success is ease now. Like what comes easy to me, what allows me to easily flow in relationships, to show up easily, to be present, to enjoy myself. And at the core, it's freedom and ease for me. It's trying to find those things that can be monetized, that maybe I've overlooked as being like, oh, that's not enough. And really having people who go, that is, and you are overlooking that. That's what my business coach has been great for. When we got on the first call, she was like, what do you think your superpowers are? And I was like, oh, like public speaking. She's like, I don't think it's that. Yours is that you help people believe in themselves. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that, I kind of brushed it off. But that doesn't have to be wrapped up in a 2-hour webinar to be worthy. That could be a 15-minute conversation. I could completely change someone's life. So it's sort of also recognizing and reevaluating how you think your value is presented in the work, and let other people contribute to that, because sometimes we hold the mindsets or limiting beliefs or just stories from past versions of ourselves, and we don't actually see the value that we give to other people, which might be coming easier than the work that we're doing.
Yeah, and to the point of past selves and your, the career come down thing where you said it's like that 7-year ick. It doesn't just have to be that you've been stuck in a dead end job. 7 to 10 years is kind of the like duration of most big projects, right? And after that time, you should either be evolving, reassessing, thinking about things. And, I've run my business now for 8 years. So I'm sort of like on this precipice of like, most people have either sold and scaled their business, or they've got an investment and reinvigorated it in some way, or they've gotten new partners or merged into something different, or they've been like, this has now come to its conclusion. So I think there's also a sense of career come down, but also maybe this is seasonal, maybe this is good, maybe this is a cycle that then opens me up to the next thing, because who I was 8 years ago is very different to who I am now, and I have completely different goals and ambitions and desires.
I would love to see more businesses stop and it not be assumed that they've gone bust, or, there's been a fallout with management, and it just be like, no, we're calling it because it's the right time. Like Jerry Seinfeld, who wrote Seinfeld, stopped writing the show because he was on a high. He didn't want to keep rehashing series because he didn't want to start making crap, basically. And I think it's really important that you emphasize that career come down isn't about, oh, I'm absolutely miserable all the time, this is really upsetting me. It's okay that something has like ran its course and maybe you've just changed. I went through something so life-changingly difficult. It's made me want to change the way I'm working. Fuck Being Humble's in its peak success year, and I'm about to start something different. It's not got anything to do with me being really upset or disappointed or like it's not added up to what I thought it was going to be. It's that I'm following my curiosity to something new, and I'm really excited about that.
That's what I'd love to normalize. I have a friend that I went to school with who was on an incredibly popular podcast, 3 Girls, really popular show. And I heard kind of through the grapevine that she decided to leave that show. And my kind of not so feminist capitalist mindset was like, oh, they either failed or she got kicked out of this thing, or like something's gone awry.
Yeah.
There's no way you would leave a successful moving train that is heading towards a kind of financial pot of gold.
Yeah.
You do not, on your own free will, leave such a thing. That was my judgment, And then I had a catch up with her, and she was like, well, I really want to focus on music. And I want to look back at my life, and I, put myself 10 years ahead. And I said, if I spent my last 10 years focusing on music or podcasting, what would I be more happy with?
Yeah.
And it was music. And I just thought, wow, that never struck me as like, that's the truth, and that happens all the time. People leave things constantly because they're just like, this is the right time. I'd like to do something else with my time. And I think our culture can't kind of comprehend that.
Well, something that's really helped me over the last year from a mindset thing is 2 things can be true. So I went to, I guess, like a spiritual healer of sorts, and it was an interesting experience. And she did brain spotting on me, which is, for anyone listening who's not familiar, you kind of use like a long stick of sorts, and the individual is asked to follow the stick moving. Your subconscious starts to come through because you're concentrating on the movement, and the person moving the stick is asking you questions. And what came out of it was, you're satisfied with Fuck Being Humble, but you're also dissatisfied. And I was like, no, surely not. That can't be. Like, I'm really happy with it. And it was really interesting that all of a sudden these thoughts from my subconscious mind were coming through that I hadn't been able to admit to myself in the conscious state, because you don't want to look like ungrateful for where you are, or you don't want to look like it's been a waste of time or any of those things. And actually 2 things can be true. Is like, I can be really happy with what I've built and love the work I do, really deeply love the work I do, but still have a yearning to do other stuff. And, I've changed jobs multiple times. I've, in our lifespan, studies have shown we're expected to have 8 to 12 careers. Like, let's normalize that and open the discussion. It's often other people's inability to see how they could make it work for themselves that makes you doubt yourself. Like, if you have that genuine feeling like, I think I'm being drawn to something else, go explore it. Like, seriously, because you can always go back to the old thing, or you can always pivot, or there's always a way to package up that story if you want to. That is what self-promotion is. But what I hate to see, what I hate to see is the people who say, I wish I'd have heard from you sooner. I wish I hadn't have sat on that thing. I wish I'd have... There's the people who have the what ifs. When I said it earlier, I don't have that, because I have that confidence in myself to explore things without the dread of, well, what if this doesn't work? And I think a big part of that is not defining what success looks like with such strict rules, and also not letting other people define success. So I get asked a lot, do you have any failures? And I'm like, not really. And I feel a bit like arrogant saying that. But when I spoke to my business coach, she was like, you just don't look at failure in the way society does. Like, you don't let people tell you that was a failure. And I think that's what's really important that we have to keep doing, is keep redefining what that success is. Keep redefining what joy is to you, what brings you contentment, happiness, creativity. One of my favorite books that I've read this year is Tiny Experiments, How to Break Free from a Goal-Obsessed World. And in it, the author talks about the fact that if we just follow our curiosities and we just set this, like, okay, I'm curious about writing a newsletter, I'm just going to write 12. That's my goal. That's it. When we just create like an experiment like that, it removes I have to grow X amount of followers and it has to be this business. And part of Fuck Being Humble's success, I think, was because I didn't have a business plan in place. I wasn't trying to make it my business. I literally I just want to host a fun event. I just want it to not be a crap networking event. That was the only metric. Like, I just want people to come and I want it to feel like a fun vibe. And I think following the joy through Fuck Being Humble in the early days is what led to the success, because I wasn't in the scarcity mindset. I was in I'm in my present, like I am being me, the version of me. Someone asked me the other day, how did you reinvent yourself to be Fuck Being Humble? And I was like, I didn't. I revealed myself. I revealed what was already within me. And I think that is what we're really on this planet to do, is to, with each year or with each decade, is just to reveal that little bit more of who you want to be, who you are, who you maybe have always been, but you didn't have the permission to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I resonate with so much of that. I was also wondering if in the stripping away, you've become any more aware of your cycle during the month.
I have functioned in masculine energy for so long.
Same.
And leaning into your cycle is actually moving more into your feminine energy, which is like that kindness, compassion, give yourself space. Like, I do somatic therapy, which is often about is connecting with the body, not just the mind. And one of the things my therapist said to me was that you sometimes, when you're having a really heavy or hard period, or you're in a lot of pain, it's your body's way of saying you need to feel this pain. You're actually holding in pain. And I actually have felt like that has become quite true for me. And there's certain months where I am carrying a lot, and then my actual cycle is really, really painful. And then there's times where I don't feel that, and there feels a lightness to it. So because my work's quite sporadic in the sense that somebody could email me tomorrow and be like, are you free next week? I can't necessarily fit my schedule around my cycle, other than saying nobody can book me between these dates. And so I think for me, it's just really not fighting it. Like, stop trying to be masculine, like be in your feminine energy. So I actually have binned off any hard cardio. And when I go to the gym now, I just do slow uphill walking. It's slow cardio is what I feel most drawn to. And that is manageable for me when I'm on my cycle. Allowing myself to be that vulnerable, like to my partner, I'm like, just fuss over me. I just need that right now. And it's not in like a, watch out, if you cross me this week, you're going to be in big trouble. That's that masculine energy. And instead it's the vulnerable energy, which is like, I'm really struggling, can you like help take this off my plate? Like, can you run to the shop and get dinner? Like, I need that. So I very much leaning into that vulnerable space, and not feeling the need to have my shit together, like just acknowledging it. And one of the things that I love is I'm very emotional, so I cry a lot in the run up to it, and I actually just quite enjoy the release. Like, I'll be watching something and I'm like, I shouldn't be crying at this. Why am I crying so much at this? But rather than like feeling guilt or shame of being like, oh my God, pull yourself together, I'm like, do you know what? Maybe you just need to have a little cry, and maybe this is just like how you do express yourself. And I'm so used to holding it together. I'm so used to performing. I'm so used to hiding behind a brave face that I allow myself just to be that person and be more vulnerable and be more honest with how I'm actually feeling.
My best friend Lauren House always says you should cry every day, because crying is a soul shower and you can't stay clean off of yesterday's shower.
Oh, obsessed. I love it.
In the lead up to this new book, is there anything that you're doing differently to how you did the last one? Obviously, I find that everything I do for the first time, I'm obviously like, oh God, I wish I'd done so many of these different things differently, because I now know in hindsight how that's supposed to be done. So you obviously also have the benefit of it being your second book. But I'm wondering if beyond the kind of obvious things of, oh, I should have sent that PR email a week earlier or something, is there anything else that you're generally doing differently, like releasing expectation or?
Yeah, I would love to give this book launch the best shot I can with it. And what I'm doing with that is not actively signing up to new projects until it's released. So the slow productivity way is fewer projects, more obsession over detail. And for me, it's like, as soon as I finished the manuscript and handed it over, I was like, right, what can I do next? And I was like, no. Brene Brown said in her first ever book flopped because she wrote it and then wouldn't self-promote it. And she said in an interview, you write the book for a year and then you got to spend the next year promoting it. And one of my toxic traits is move on to the next thing. I don't give enough space to the ideas that I create because I'm too busy jumping onto the next thing. So I've poured my life, soul, tears, vulnerability into this latest book, and I really want to give it the effort it deserves to succeed, but obviously under the parameters of not burning out and all of that. But to do that, my version of slowing down is not accepting anything else and like treating this with the care and the attention and the celebration it deserves before I take on something else it's the longest project I think I've ever worked on. It's 2 years of my life consistently.
It's skipped the 18-month.
It was, it's been a long, and by the time it comes out, it'd be 2.5. It's a long project. I don't want to let the noise of other potential goals take me away from really giving this all the glory it deserves. So that's what I'm trying to do, is spotlight it, celebrate it, and do it at a comfortable pace, but also not let my attention be taken away by other things at a time where I just really want to sit in the moment.
I love that, and I'm very excited for the book to come out very, very soon. A final question that I ask everybody is, if I had to watch one film or read one book or go see one piece of art that would help me understand you better, what would it be and why?
Do you know what? I'm going to be really honest with it. I grew up in the Bridget Jones, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days era. And that, I think, is me. It's the honesty in dialogue. It's the self-deprecation. It's the mocking ourselves. It's being a bit of a klutz. It's not really having it together, but trying to put on a good front when you do see people. It's the vulnerable side. It's the imperfect, fluffy edges that we don't always see. And I think a lot of people are always like, oh, you seem like really polished on the outside and and I'm like, anybody in my inner circle knows that I am extremely silly. Like, I laugh at myself all the time. I trip up over things. Can be chaotic in different ways. And I think those shows, those films were really, they were influential to me at a time. I'm sure I should be saying something more academic or more artsy or more interesting, but when people read Fuck Being Humble, they were like, it was like a best friend speaking to me,
which is really powerful.
Yeah, and what I describe it as, I say it's the Bridget Jones for self-help. Like, that's it. It's a collection of funny stories and things that can help people but also make people feel seen. And I think that's what I've always really cared about, is making people feel seen, and those films did. It's why they're icon cult classics. You feel a sense of something in those characters. The likableness of someone who's a bit messy is something that I think is really admirable. Relatability is one of the things that I care the most about. The minute I'm not relatable to people, I worry. Like, that is something I've tried to evolve my work over the years to continue to be relatable to my audience.
For what it's worth, I think you're very relatable. That's something I've always noticed when I've heard you speak. I feel calm. I feel like I'm with friends. I'm in an audience, but it's like I want to respond to everything that you say with like my own anecdotes and stories. And so that's always a nice way to be. And, you know, full circle to what you said at the beginning of what you didn't see, which was these conversations and panels and talks that can feel very serious.
Yeah.
And overly serious, overly like, yeah, this is all an emergency. And here's like the very serious campaign thing that I did. And yeah, having that sense of levity and that sense of relatability, I think you 100% have.
Thank you.
Are there any other thoughts you'd like to share on this topic that I might have missed?
So I think the thing I'd love people to reflect on, especially as if they're going through a career come down or if they're navigating challenges in their career, is sitting with yourself and asking yourself, where can I pull back? So where have you done enough? Where don't you need to show up? Where can you go under the radar a bit more? Because there's a likelihood you're probably overgiving in different areas. And I don't want you to get to a breaking point before you start to have that conversation with yourself. So ask yourself, where can I pull back 10%, 20%? And in a way that it wouldn't be disruptive to either your professional or personal life, but it allows you to claw back time for yourself, because that has been such a game changer for me. And it's such a simple thing for us to do that can have a big impact on our ability to slow down.
What do you do in a society where you're constantly being asked to do more? You're being asked to share in a certain type of way. Well, if that post works, you should release it 8 different ways. The advice is post more, share more, do more, be more. Like, how do you contend with that?
I think it's finding mediums that you can handle. So whenever I came to writing a newsletter for the business, it would take ages. It would take 2 days. I'd resent it. I'd be like, it's free work. No one's paying me, all of these things. And I just very quickly changed the model. And I was like, how do I do this and make it impactful, but strip it back to as minimum as possible? So I went from doing a monthly, all singing, all dancing newsletter to a weekly Monday motivation email. I save down, I'm addicted to Instagram, TikTok, all channels. I choose a resource, I write less than 100 words on it, and that's it. So I am visibly showing up weekly, but the effort it takes is less. So I would ask you to look at that equation of like, where can I strip back the depth in which I'm putting it in? And how could I maybe sprinkle myself across fewer, lighter moments that create that level of visibility? So even things like sometimes for me creating social media assets, I'm like, oh God, I really can't be asked. And then I just realized I'm like, well, just go on stories. Stories that should take me 10 seconds. I don't question myself as much. I don't doubt myself. I don't care because it only lasts 24 hours. And actually someone said to me the other day, she was like, oh, I feel like you're killing it with socials. I was like, I've not posted in 3 weeks on the grid. I was like, I don't know where you've got that from. She's like, oh, it's, I guess because you're showing up on stories. So I guess that's to the earlier point, is like finding ease in that delivery. So what is the easy version of that? Stop following what everyone else tells you. Oh, well, that's, you know, trending videos where you've got someone narrating your life in a 3-minute video. That's the trend right now. I'm like, don't care.
That would take me
a week to make. Yeah, I'm not doing that, right? Move on, next thing. So I think it is trying to find the methods, mediums. I've said it all the way through with Fuck Being Humble. Only self-promote in the ways that are going to show you in the best possible way. If it has taken you hours to create and you resent it and you feel angry and you're pouring that energy into it, it's not going to show you in the best way. So strip it back. And if I said to you, you have to make this as simple as possible and you have to make it in the next hour, you have to batch create multiple things in the next hour, how would you do it? So like it's less is more sometimes. I think we've gone so much in the over giving, which I'm a victim to as well, because of free content and because of showing up on every channel. And I've realized in recent weeks, I can get away with posting once a week and I still get inquiries coming in and I still have people saying my name in rooms. So it's not about the way that you're showing up on digital channels. It's also how you show up in real life. It's how you speak to people. It's the recommendations you give. It's the way you support people, you know. Stop seeing content creation as the only way to get your value across and look at how you can strip it back to its simplest form that still gives value but doesn't rob you of your time and energy.
Really good advice. I think that's a great place to conclude. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. This episode was hosted and created by me, Tiana Tambridge. It was produced by Whitney Rosenthal, with sound and video produced and recorded at Brazen Studios. Cover art and design by Natalia Ruhe, and the sponsor for this whole season is Clue. Please subscribe to The Slowdown to be notified of upcoming episodes, tell a friend and leave a review, because it really helps a podcast like this get out there into the world. And remember, we're all heading to the same destination and there is no prize for getting there early, so we might as well slow down.